First, Ham, that was a great introduction to the discussion, which is really who's going to use this urban real estate for the alternative, suburban or other configuration. So what we thought we'd do was put together a panel of an occupier and an investor. So Luigi is the head of corporate real estate for Symantec, a global IT firm based here in Silicon Valley, and he is a corporate architect. He builds and develops, he leases, he buys, and he designs and creates space in order to make Symantec more competitive in the business they do, IT security. And interestingly enough, he's an occupier now, but he worked with Shorenstein and Shua as an investor. Now, with him, on my left is Tom Sullivan. Tom is a principal and founder of Wilson Maney Sullivan. He's a developer, an investor, financier, creating real estate, focusing on mixed-use project. He's done urban, he's done suburban, mixed-use office, retail, and industrial and not industrial, residential. And two of his best-known projects are Bay Meadows, which is a project just up the road in San Mateo, and one under preliminary stages of development at Treasure Island out in the middle of the bay. And interestingly enough, Tom was an occupier with Sun Microsystems. So you've got kind of both sides of the equation, both having worked on both sides. I'm Jim Arce, I'm your moderator. I'm with Cushman & Wakefield's corporate occupier and investor services. We manage and deliver integrated solutions for both occupiers and investors. I've done both. I currently run investors, but I've run the Symantec account, Sun Microsystems account, PG&E account, so I'm also bilingual. So let's start with Ham. I mean, one of the things that's interesting is we saw this flight out of the cities. We saw this urban decay, driven largely by the people coming back from World War II and the baby boomers and that desire for that ideal housing situation. And what it seems like is happening is there's a blur in my mind between suburbia and the urban environment. For example, this property here, is this the suburbs? Is this an urban environment? Is it a little bit of both? What's your take?
That's exactly what I was trying to say, that the definition of urban and suburban is very clear.
Mm-hmm.
So that instead of people going back to the city, the work is coming into the suburb. So there's a mix. So we will see these mini centers and mini nodes going to be all over. So eventually you'll see there is the major city, a kind of residue of the past.
Like a San Francisco or a New York?
So, and some of them are going to be grand and going to stay there depending on the desirability of that city, or depending on a variety of other factors. Like San Francisco, there are places that, like Cleveland, that is there.
My wife's from Cleveland, so.
No, it's a beautiful city, but
It's just there.
but it is half, maybe three-quarters, it is empty.
Mm-hmm.
And, is it going to come back? I'm not sure. We've said it's going to come back since 1950s. There was efforts to bring it back to life. Is it still the same? But there are San Francisco, there are Chicago, there are New York, that they're going to stay. So that's one that we don't know about city. But what we do know that there are corporations like this corporation, Nokia, coming to suburb, and they're functioning very well with a surrounding residential community. And that pattern is going to continue.
Well, let's take a look and start with a project that Tom did, which I think you described kind of a community node. Talk about Bay Meadows. It was a big parcel in the middle of suburbia. Talk about what you did and the vision around that.
Well, Bay Meadows was a horse racing track, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, and we re-entitled it for a mixed-use community of up to 1.25 million square feet of office space and 1,100 residential units and ancillary retail. So it's just beginning to be developed now. We built some infrastructure, and we in fact just had the first residential parcel out for offers from, in other words, out to offer to sell to residential builders with offers due just this past Friday. So it's a project that is just at the cusp of coming to fruition, and we think it's the best piece of real estate probably in the Bay Area, frankly. It has the characteristics that will make it an urban node within what we think of as traditionally a suburban footprint, very much like Sunnydale Town Center, which is what this project that we're in right now is. These are the kinds of locations that companies increasingly want to be in. In fact, the changes in the corporate locational criteria as we've observed them, even over the last 6 to 7 to 8 years, have been just dramatic. I mean, it's really not overstated to say they've been dramatic. Now, at least half of the companies that are looking for office space out there today, I would say, would prefer to have high-quality Class A space as convenient to transit as possible. On the peninsula, of course, there's not a lot of transit. There's the light rail, there's the Caltrain, but proximity to transit is just an enormously valuable thing, and that's why this location is such a good location. That's why Nokia is here. In fact, we actually, in our capacity as advisors to the bank, worked with Nokia on putting them in this building, and it had the characteristics they wanted. They wanted to be in an urban setting where you can walk to lunch, and where, if you, depending on where you live, you might even be able to take the train to work. They notice it's the same thing, and that's why we believe so strongly in these kinds of locations.
You know, you made an interesting comment around corporate location strategies, and what I'm hearing from Ham and hearing from you, it's around a balance of work, of living, and that interface with transit, and then obviously technologies amplifying all that. Luigi, corporate relocation strategies, you've got product all over the world. Has your corporate relocation strategy changed? And, you know, from a global footprint, are you looking urban, are you looking suburban? Give us some perspective from Samantha.
I think what's happened in the last 10 years has been a complete change for, you know, we take a harder look at the location of our employee base. Where's the housing, where's the transportation, and then how do you blend that with the client base? So we have a tendency to go more suburbia, but urbanized suburbia. We have a tendency to go with Adobe and a few other companies. We're doing a Ways to Work program, which allows our employees not to have to come in, but yet they want to be close enough to come in, right? So you find that employees tend to want to have the convenience to collaborate. They want to have the technology, but they don't want to be forced to come in, but they want the convenience of a short drive. So right now, we're seeing a definite shift in the last 5 years, especially, where we have more of the individuals say, how can I get more flexibility, more balance, more work life? And I think that trend is not just sort of moving, it's accelerating. Because when I look around the world and I see what other countries are doing, I was in Singapore in the spring, and we were looking at another co-location consolidation. It wasn't just downtown financial, it's how do we take our financial people that really don't live there, but they like to work there? Where are their customer bases, and how do we move them farther out where they're closer to the transportation they need and housing? So it's a mindset shift, because if we even go back to what Ham said about the 1800s of Solomon, when I look at Foxconn in China, it's a work-live city with 300,000 employees. When I look at the new cities around Asia, they're not a few 100,000 people in a blurred environment. They're a million people. They're 2 million people. This is a city that's 30 million people. And what does it do? It reduces your carbon footprint where I'm living, I'm working, I'm eating, I'm playing within a 4-block radius. So it's even shrinking. It's not the 5-mile drive or the 10-mile drive. It's how do I do the 1.5 miles? When I first moved to California, I actually lived across the city. And I picked that location because it was easy convenience to the peninsula, it was easy convenience to Silicon Valley. I could work, live, and play, walk around the lake. I mean, so that goes back to 83. You know? So you can see the change. It's happening. We have to sort of open our eyes up and say, how do we keep it going? And when I look at organizations like the new campus that Apple's doing, or the new campus that Salesforce is doing, even though they're going downtown, what are they doing? They're on the outskirts of downtown, they're urbanizing it. So it's really interesting to see how can we take employees, if they come in, how can we be more productive? How can it be more convenient? How can they do the work, live, shop type thing? And when they come in, they're more productive. Adobe's a perfect example. They're downtown San Jose. There are so many restaurants. There's so many hotels. It's so convenient for their employees. It's a big plus. So it's definitely a trend that's accelerating.
So it definitely seems like that. Let's touch on one other kind of urban community node, and then I want to explore why is that trend accelerating, because it seems to be accelerating at an accelerating rate. Tom, you're doing another big new community in Treasure Island, creating a city where nothing exists. You know, in the middle of the bay, an old Navy base, you don't see a lot of urban infill sites like that. Tell us about that vision and how that blend of transit and lifestyle and work interfaces.
Sure, that one's a little different because Treasure Island will be served by buses and by ferries, but we don't actually see it as a work destination. We don't have any material amount of office space in that plant. It's principally a residential plant, a relatively high density residential plant. Obviously, it'd be extremely convenient to the city and to Oakland. It offers you know, tremendous views of the Bay Area, in fact, remarkable views of the Bay Area. But it also creates an opportunity to create what we think will be a terrific environment within and of itself, and it'll incorporate the amenities that people care about that are all the same thing that make people attracted to places like this. It provides a compactness of lifestyle that allows one to conduct one's everyday life in an easy, stress-free way that consumes little to no time in going back and forth from place to place. So there will be a retail component that will contain all the necessities of everyday life, and people will be able to walk through it easily. And so it'll be a terrific neighborhood, but it won't have a large commercial component for the reasons I mentioned.
But you're essentially creating a community, housing a suburban community, albeit in the middle of the city. You know, right in the middle of Berkeley, Oakland, and San Francisco.
Right.
In
Well,
close proximity to tremendous work opportunities.
right. Well, people in general, I think, have had their tolerance for commuting strained by the distances and the congestion that we have come to experience today, like my own down here. That's one example.
80% in the morning.
The younger people are smarter than I am, and they'd like to avoid that, and everybody is realizing that these days. And so I think that people are increasingly appreciative of the benefits of a more urban setting, which is to say the ability of that setting to support amenities, which makes life richer, and the trade-off of that is, you give up the backyard. But increasingly, people are inclined to make that trade-off, and particularly the younger people who really do have, I think, a different sensibility about a lot of things, including how much physical space they think they should consume in their own lifestyle, the extent to which they have any interest in driving a car as opposed to being taken in some sort of a mass transit vehicle to work, and in the extent of impact they perceive they have on their lifestyle has on the environment.
Let's go with what you just said. You used the word a couple times, the younger people. I'm a baby boomer. I think we're all baby boomers. Suburbia was driven by people coming back from, particularly World War II, looking for a pleasant, safe, open living environment. And the baby boomers followed that and followed out in suburbia. We have a whole different generation with a whole different set of criteria on how they live, how they work, and how they balance that. Let's start with Ham. I mean, you are creating the workforce of the future at your university. What's the perspective of those students? What are they looking for in terms of opportunities for work, in terms of lifestyle? Talk to us a little bit about your customers, the students in your university.
It's quite interesting, Rosie, I think about it. While you're correct that a lot of younger generation, particularly students who are now 22, 23, 24 graduates, they have less desire to go to these suburban homes or big suburban homes. But they still, the thirst for space has not been reduced. So we're not talking, of course we're not talking about 3,000 or 4,000, but when you talk to them, they're now interested in 600 or 700 or 1,000. 1,000, 1,500 maybe, but so there's that.
So not quite as far as Europe. There's still one.
Exactly, there is some. But more interesting is that they're not willing to give up their cars, even though they want to. You're absolutely correct. They want to be near their workplace. They don't want to spend too much time driving to work back and forth. But they do love their cars, and they want their cars needed. I mean, whatever, so the garage are important. We have one of the biggest problems in university we have is the parking. If you raise the students' fees, you get all these revolts at that point, right? But if you use if you increase parking fees, as long as there's parking, it's quiet. So students are willing to pay for the parking. And interestingly enough, There are even talking about, when you sit with them, they're expecting that to categorize parking. Okay, if I can park near the building, I can pay more as long as I have the seat. Or some of them even argue, why don't we have assigned parking? So why don't you try? So they're going to say there's the notion of parking.
You could do reserved spaces and really jack up your fees.
Trust me, I even moved it from staff. Because
The students can probably afford
there
to
is the
pay more.
disparities. There are poor students who can't afford it. They constantly tell us why that space is empty and I can't park and I have to go 3 miles away. But regardless, I mean, the parking spaces are important. And then if you look at also how they spend their money, a big portion of their money is on cars. So you look at the cars, the faculty cars, the staff cars, they're all old cars. You look at the student cars, they're all brand new cars. And but when you follow the students where they live 3 or 4 of them in one house that they rented, and the house is in the 1950s, 60s, in really bad shape. So they're compromising the living places for a good car. So that's
I'm not sure if they're compromising or the parents are compromising, because most of the parents are giving them a new car to go away to college, to drive home.
That's true too.
So Luigi, you're engineering real estate at Symantec to serve 2 purposes. One, obviously to sell to your customers, but 2, to recruit successfully in a competitive recruiting environment the workforce of the future. How are you using real estate and how are you modifying real estate, both in terms of location and in terms of the workspace itself, to be more competitive in recruiting people?
And I think what we're doing as a company is looking for ways to attain and attract the workforce. Our workforce is a little older, more experienced, so we don't have a mid-20s group, we have a mid-35 group because of our technology. So when we look at that workforce, they do want to have their house still, but yet they want to be close. And when you look at how they're working, we're finding typically, 40+% of them don't come in. Why? Because we've given them technology. So what we've done as a company, we're investing more in technology, and now we're trying to now capture and harvest that benefit that we gave them by reshaping our real estate and constantly repositioning, consolidating, and shrinking it to make it more efficient and effective. So technology's been a big investment for the company. And it's a balance on who and when they have to come in and how do you collaborate. So we actually now have to reshape our real estate to get more collaboration space. So it's something we missed in the beginning on the collaboration piece. The technology has actually changed, what Pam talked about earlier, when we looked at baby boomers, when we first came, the World War II people that came back and the baby boomers, we were educated differently. We didn't want to go to live here, right? Now, hey, I want to be closer. I want to take the advantage of the technology. So we're trying to harvest what's the right balance of technology, right? What's the right balance of that technology to allow them to collaborate, and how do we reshape our real estate as we go forward? And it is definitely changing. We're just seeing a total trend, and we've tracking it for the last 6 years. We're seeing the trend, the equipment, the type of space, more collaboration space, less me space, and more we space.
That's an interesting perspective. We heard in the Nokia discussion the use of collaborative space, both formal and ad hoc, getting teams together and so on. And like you're right, you don't need to come in. I got here early and I was at Starbucks and I got as much done at Starbucks as I was in my office, but I wasn't able to meet with team members and talk and think about ideas. Tom, the office market it has changed from privates to now less meet space, more collaborative space. How do you keep up with that? How do you know what to build and how do you maybe build something that if it's changed in the last 5 years, it might change again? So how do you as a developer and investor build product that has the flexibility to serve different needs over different times?
Well, we keep an eye on what the tenants are doing, principally, like Nokia here. I think they've done a good job here in creating some great space of that type. We try to build buildings that have big, expansive floor plates that provide as much flexibility as possible for companies to lay them out in whatever way works for them. We see companies going to increasingly dense configurations. Companies, I would say in general, I think that companies in the city where, we're actually based in San Francisco probably are, maybe out of necessity in some cases more further along sort of this curve, if you will, than companies down here are, because they inhabit a variety of buildings that covers a broader range and lots of older buildings and so forth, and they value a couple of things. They value the collaborative environment, they value the open spaces that many of these large floor plate, older, formerly warehouse buildings in many cases provide, and they value the industrial aesthetic that many of these buildings provide. And so in the city, interestingly, if you have a good quality brick and timber building, one of the old buildings with a timber frame and brick walls that gives that interior aesthetic, or an old concrete industrial building in a good location, you're almost certainly in a position to command a higher rent than non-view space in a Class A high-rise downtown, because the demand is for the alternative space. And so it's both the functional factors and the aesthetic look and feel of this space that companies find attractive. So when we design new buildings, and we're working on a new one now in Silicon Valley, that where we are doing some things differently from the convention in order to try to create this space. One of the things we're doing is designing a building with a concrete structure rather than a steel structure, for example, because it lends itself to a different interior aesthetic. And the order of preference of those things in the city, where the tenancy has a choice, is very distinct. Brick and timber is what everybody really wants if they can get it. Concrete is a good second, and a conventional steel building runs third. Nokia's done a great job here with a conventional steel building by leaving the volumes open and dropping drop ceilings only in some places but not others. So they take advantage of the volume the building offers and create a space that feels distinctly different from conventional office space. And the workforce of today, and again, especially the younger people, really want a workspace that feels differently. They don't want a workspace that feels like the same old office space that their dad used to occupy. So it's something we think a lot about when we're designing new buildings, and we actively try to create a building that will provide an alternative feel and lend itself to the kinds of build-outs companies are doing in space.
So flexibility in the creation of space is important. The interface between transit and housing and workspace is also key. A workforce that's much more mobile, that spends more time collaborating, interfacing, are key drivers. But we're in the Bay Area, one of the most dynamic urban settings globally, frankly, very desirable place to live. And you talked about these big cities around the country, Chicago, New York. Is this going to happen everywhere? Is it going to be selective as to where people go? What's your take in the future of specific urban, not necessarily naming them, but is it going to happen in each major city, or some going to survive and some not going to survive, like Cleveland?
What I can tell you is that what we are seeing, and I think in the Gulf Coast, this phenomenon is much more severe, much more intense than Middle America. I would say Middle America is still a little behind in that aspect, because there are plenty of single-family homes affordable, and also now they're building single-family homes, smaller lots, but still with a little yard, and still surviving and so forth. In most of the Western cities, I would say less of that, but it doesn't mean that it's not going to go that way. There are few spots, you can see that in Texas, in Dallas, in Houston, but Dallas and Houston are always with the spread.
Well, there's unlimited land, and they can just keep growing in that concentric circle.
So there are different characteristics, but if Nova Place, USA, you're talking about smaller communities, so that's still together. Well, one thing I wanted to share with you is that we were talking about the younger generation, is that we are seeing more and more and more that they are adopted to smaller workplaces. They don't have to have a fancy office. They don't have to have a post office. But what they are demanding is a state-of-the-art technology. As we keep investing more in hardware and software, they're still not satisfied, because they always have a kind of more expanded knowledge of me and our consultants that they come in and say, even if we're talking about students, well, what, we don't have this, we don't have that, we don't have this platform, I can't do my work. I mean, how do you know, first of all, such a thing exists? To begin with, I mean, and
You
so.
saw it on the internet.
Yeah, so it's going to see, so that's really the speed of which, and I saw those beautiful workstations that we were designing, and so that's something that we are going to be able to work out, and it's very good. You have to have our infrastructure.
I think we're out of time. So just to wrap, what we're hearing from Adam's original presentation now is the future of real estate is constantly evolving. It pushed out to the open space and is coming back in, seeking that blend, seeking lifestyles, seeking workspace, transit, being heavily influenced by technology and the velocity that technology allows us to work at. And it's really focused on flexibility, collaborative space, less individual space. But it feels to me like the office space of the future is almost a club environment where people are getting together to exchange ideas, to explore ideas, and it's less about a place to work, it's more about a place to meet your colleagues and look for something new and different. So, Tom, Luigi, Ham, thank you very much.